Victorian nursery rhymes are things that we tend to think of as being particularly about a lovely white world. So you've got people like Jack and Jill and Little Jack Horner. These are characters, you never think of Jack as anything but white, unlike Three-Fingered Jack, who we have seen before. We tend to think of the Victorian period as a particularly white time in British history. It is a time that is after the abolition of slavery and before the advent of Windrush. Those are the two particular times in British history that we think of Black people as existing in the British consciousness. But in fact, if we look at Victorian nursery rhymes, we actually find evidence of not just heroes like Mary Seacole, for example, appearing in children's literature, but actually everyday, ordinary Black people appearing within the course of books for very small children. So, for example, you take an illustrator like Walter Crane, major illustrator of the time, who not only designed children's books, but also greetings cards and tiles that went on the Carnegie libraries that were popping up around Britain in the 1880s. He also was thinking about the people around him at the time. So while Jack and Jill and Little Jack Horner from some of his earlier children's picture books were all white, if you look at the 1875 Alphabet of Old Friends, it's an alphabet that uses each alphabet letter to depict a particular nursery rhyme. So J is also for another Jack, Jack Sprat, and he's white and his wife is white. But if you look down and you follow the page down to the letter K, what you have is Old King Cole. Now, if you remember the nursery rhyme Old King Cole was a merry old soul. A merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe and he called for his bowl and he called for his fiddlers three. And the fiddlers in Crane's picture are actually depictions of three kinds of musicians that were very familiar to Victorian audiences. One was the German, because Munich was actually the center of where you would go to learn music if you wanted to be a musician. An Italian, because Italian opera was very important at the time, and you have him next to the German, and then right at the front, you have a Black fellow. And he's been there all the time, and yet, nobody has really commented on him throughout history. He's dressed, unlike the German and the Italian, in a particular outfit. And that particular outfit involves a striped pants, and this is the outfit of a seaside minstrel. Now, in the Victorian period, seaside minstrels were very common. First of all, the seaside became important because Queen Victoria went to the seaside, and then it was all very trendy to go to the seaside. And entertainments appeared around the seaside because, strangely enough, British seasides are not always that great for bathing. So you have to have entertainments at the same time. And so these minstrels were often indigenous Black people who had either been born in the country or who had been enslaved, brought to Britain, and then abandoned by their white owners when abolition came. They had to find their living some way, and a lot of times that's how they did it. They would sing, they would play music around the seaside. So Walter Crane depicts this without comment in his nursery rhymes. Now, Christina Rossetti, in her 1872 sing-song, also depicted a Black man, but in a very different fashion. Whereas the seaside minstrel is a working class or poor figure. In the nursery rhyme about the rose with the bonny blush, Rossetti's illustration, which is actually by Arthur Hughes, a pre-Raphaelite painter and illustrator, is of a Black scientist. He's got spectacles. He's examining the sun, which gives the rose its bonny blush. And in one way, it's an ironic comment on how white people saw Black people at the time. They were curious about them. They wanted to know whether they could blush, whether they had similarities to white people or not. But in another way, by dressing him up in middle class clothing, making him scientific by examining the sun and the rose. Rossetti and Arthur Hughes are depicting a black man as a very different part of society, and a part of society that can contribute to all of Britain. And I think that that's something that we overlook. We don't think of that as being part of Victorian society. Now, of course, today we continue to have nursery rhymes. We have nursery rhymes such as books such as No Hickory, No Dickory, No Dock by John Agard and Grace Nichols, which include nursery rhymes from the Caribbean, British nursery rhymes that have been changed in the Caribbean, and all new rhymes and stories as well. And similarly, in the exhibition we have Down by the River, collected by Grace Hallworth, which a lot of those are traditional English nursery rhymes, but they've been changed slightly with Caribbean language, sometimes patois, and also, the illustrations show Black children playing and Black children being the center of attention. So I think it's really important that we have books for the very young that show how Black people have been a part of society.